What would you do if you walked into a luxury car dealership, ready to make a life-changing purchase, only to be humiliated and dismissed because of who you are? That's exactly what happened to Melanie Carter, a self-made millionaire and CEO, when she was met with shocking arrogance and discrimination from the dealership's owner. But Melanie isn't someone who backs down. What starts as a personal insult quickly spirals into a battle that exposes systemic injustice, sparks a national movement, and delivers a poetic twist that no one saw coming. How did Melanie turn humiliation into triumph? And what devastating secret brought her adversary to his knees? Stay tuned to find out as we unravel Melanie's powerful journey of resilience and justice. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more gripping stories like this one. What would you have done in Melanie's shoes? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's dive into this unforgettable story. The golden hour sunlight streamed through the towering windows of Regal Auto House, casting a warm glow over the gleaming cars arranged like works of art. Melanie Carter stepped into the showroom, her heels clicking softly against the polished marble floor. Her tailored navy suit hugged her frame, a quiet statement of her success, though she had always believed her actions spoke louder than her attire. She paused, her gaze falling on a Lamborghini Huracan. Its sleek lines and matte black finish caught her eye, stirring a sense of accomplishment. This was not just a car. It was a testament to her journey from a single-parent household in Baltimore to the CEO of Carter Asset Management, managing billions in assets. A group of well-dressed men lounged near the coffee bar, their laughter mingling with the soft hum of classical music. They glanced at her briefly before resuming their conversation, as if dismissing her presence. Melanie wasn't new to such reactions. She'd encountered skepticism her entire career. Still, she had not expected it here, in a place where money should have been the great equalizer. "Good afternoon, ma'am," said a salesman, offering her a practiced smile. Before Melanie could respond, a booming voice interrupted. "Don't bother, Greg," said Bryce Hammond, the dealership's owner. Tall and sharply dressed, Bryce exuded the kind of confidence that came from a lifetime of unearned privilege. "I'll handle this one." Bryce approached, his expression already tinged with condescension. "How can I help you today?" he asked, his tone so saccharine it bordered on mocking. Melanie didn't flinch. "I'd like to learn more about the Huracan," she said, her voice calm yet commanding. Bryce arched an eyebrow, scanning her appearance as though assessing her worth. "The Huracan," he repeated, drawing out the word as if tasting its syllables. "That's one of our premium models, starting at $250,000. Perhaps you prefer something less intimidating." Melanie held his gaze. "I'm quite certain of what I want." Bryce chuckled, shaking his head. "Look, lady, let's save each other some time. This isn't a museum. If you're here for Instagram photos, you're in the wrong place. Maybe try the used car lot down the street." Gasps rippled through the showroom. The laughter at the coffee bar ceased. Melanie could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on her, some curious, others uncomfortable. Her jaw tightened, but she forced herself to remain composed. "I didn't come here for a lecture," she said evenly. "I came here to buy a car. Are you interested in making a sale? Or should I take my business elsewhere?" Bryce's smirk widened. "I think we both know how this ends." "Security," he called over his shoulder. "Escort this woman out before she makes a scene." Two burly security guards appeared, their expressions apologetic but firm. Bryce gestured dismissively toward the door. "You're wasting everyone's time." Melanie's heart pounded, not from fear, but from the indignity of it all. She thought of her mother, who had taught her never to let others define her worth. She thought of her son, Evan, who believed in using the law to dismantle systems of injustice. And she thought of herself, standing here, humiliated yet unbroken. As the guards approached, she raised her chin. "You'll regret this," she said quietly, locking eyes with Bryce. "Mark my words." Bryce only laughed, his voice echoing through the cavernous space. "I doubt that." Later that evening, Melanie sat in her penthouse apartment overlooking Boston Harbor. The city lights twinkled like distant stars, a stark contrast to the turbulence in her mind. She picked up a photo from her desk, her and Evan on his graduation day, both beaming with pride. Evan had inherited her sharp mind and his late father's towering frame. As a civil rights attorney, he had made a name for himself tackling cases of corporate discrimination. Her mind wandered back to her own journey. She had clawed her way up from an entry-level accounting position, working nights to earn her MBA while raising Evan alone after her husband's death. The barriers she faced being underestimated, ignored, or outright dismissed had only fueled her determination. The door opened, and Evan walked in, still in his tailored suit from work. At 32, he was already one of the youngest partners at a prestigious law firm, a testament to his relentless drive. "Mom," he said, setting down his briefcase. "You look upset. What happened?" Melanie recounted the events at Regal Auto House, her voice steady despite the emotions threatening to spill over. Evan listened intently, his expression hardening with every word. "They had you escorted out?" he asked, his voice low with disbelief. She nodded. "It wasn't just about me, Evan. It's about what it represents. People like Bryce think they can treat others however they want because no one holds them accountable." Evan leaned back, a thoughtful look on his face. "We're going to change that." The two talked late into the night, sketching out a strategy. Evan would dig into Bryce's business practices, looking for patterns of discrimination. Melanie would leverage her network to gather testimonies from other customers and amplify the story through the media. "I'll need to tread carefully," Evan said. "This isn't just about winning a case. It's about setting a precedent." Melanie smiled, a glimmer of hope lighting her eyes. "That's why I raised you to fight battles that matter." The next morning, Melanie stood by the window, watching the sun rise over the harbor. The humiliation she had felt at Regal Auto House had been replaced by a steely resolve. Bryce Hammond might have dismissed her, but he had no idea who he was dealing with. As Evan left for work, he paused at the door. "Mom," he said, his voice filled with quiet determination, "get ready. We're just getting started." Melanie nodded. "I've been ready my whole life." The story of Melanie's experience at Regal Auto House quickly spread after she shared it with her inner circle. Over breakfast with her best friend, Diane Hill, a prominent journalist, Melanie relayed the incident in vivid detail. Diane, a fiery advocate for social justice, was appalled. "You can't let this slide, Mel," she said, pushing her coffee aside. "People need to know this happens, even to someone as accomplished as you." Reluctantly, Melanie agreed to let Diane write an article for a major publication. Within 24 hours of its release, the piece went viral, titled, "Luxury Showroom or Gatekeeper's Den? A CEO's Encounter with Discrimination at Regal Auto House." The article painted a vivid picture of Melanie's humiliation, but also underscored the broader issue of systemic bias in luxury spaces. Comments poured in from readers who shared similar stories of being judged based on appearance or race. Meanwhile, Bryce Hammond sat in his office, his face flushed as he read the article. He slammed his fist on the desk. "This is ridiculous," he barked at his assistant, Carter James. Carter hesitated. "The article is gaining traction, sir. Should we release a statement?" Bryce sneered. "We don't owe anyone an explanation. That woman's just bitter because she couldn't afford the car. Trust me, this will blow over." But it didn't. Local news stations picked up the story, and soon Melanie found herself invited to speak on a popular morning show. Calm and articulate, she recounted the events without malice, but with firm conviction. "This isn't just about me," she said, addressing the camera. "It's about the way we judge people unfairly. No one should have to prove their worth before being treated with respect." The interview became a rallying cry for others who had been marginalized in similar ways. On social media, hashtags like "Open the Doors" and "Justice in Luxury" began trending. Stories of discrimination in high-end establishments flooded timelines, adding fuel to the fire. Melanie wasn't prepared for the wave of attention. While many praised her courage, others dismissed her as seeking publicity. Bryce capitalized on these sentiments, appearing on a local talk show to paint himself as the victim. "She came in with a chip on her shoulder," he told the host. "We've built our reputation on exclusivity. Some people just don't belong in certain spaces." The backlash was immediate. Clips of his statement circulated online, drawing outrage. For the first time, Bryce began to realize the seriousness of the situation. Evan dove headfirst into the legal and investigative aspects of the case. Working late into the night, he scoured online reviews and complaints about Regal Auto House. Patterns began to emerge. Women and people of color frequently reported being dismissed or mistreated. "Mom," he said during one of their late-night strategy sessions, "this isn't an isolated incident. Bryce's behavior is part of a larger issue with his business practices." Melanie nodded. "Then we need to make this bigger than just us. If there are others, they deserve justice too." Evan's meticulous work paid off when he uncovered an email thread between Bryce and his sales team. In it, Bryce explicitly instructed staff to prioritize traditional clientele and screen out the time wasters. The language, thinly veiled in corporate jargon, was damning. Despite the mounting evidence, the pressure began to take its toll on Melanie. Her phone buzzed constantly with calls and messages, some supportive, others hateful. Online trolls targeted her, questioning her character and motives. One night, after a particularly harsh comment thread, Melanie sat alone in her living room, staring at the city lights. "Was I wrong to push this?" she whispered when Evan called to check in. "Never," he said firmly. "Mom, you're doing this not just for yourself, but for every person who's ever been treated unfairly. Don't let them silence you." His words reignited her resolve. She wasn't just fighting Bryce Hammond, she was challenging a system that thrived on exclusion. The case took a dramatic turn when a former employee of Regal Auto House, Sophia Martinez, reached out to Evan. A single mother who had worked as a receptionist, Sophia had quit after enduring Bryce's toxic environment. "He told me to stick to answering phones when I asked about moving into sales," Sophia revealed during a recorded interview. "He said our clients wouldn't trust someone like me to handle big purchases." Her testimony became a cornerstone of the case, humanizing the systemic discrimination within the dealership. As Melanie's story gained momentum, she received an unexpected call from Richard Ellison, the CEO of a rival luxury dealership chain. "Ms. Carter," Richard began, "I read about your experience, and I want to help. If you're serious about changing this industry, let's collaborate." Together, they announced a joint initiative to promote diversity and inclusion in high-end retail spaces. The move added credibility to Melanie's mission and further isolated Bryce in the court of public opinion. The culmination of the introduction occurs at a press conference organized by Melanie's team. Standing behind a podium, flanked by Evan, Sophia, and Richard, Melanie addressed a packed room of journalists. "This fight isn't just mine," she said, her voice steady. "It belongs to every person who has been told they don't belong, who has been judged before being seen. Today, we say enough." The room erupted in applause. In the back, Diane Hill caught Melanie's eye and gave her an encouraging nod. Meanwhile, across town, Bryce Hammond watched the press conference from his office, his expression dark. For the first time, the reality of his situation sank in. Melanie Carter was not backing down, and she wasn't alone. The press conference had been a success, but the fight was far from over. Melanie Carter knew that publicity alone wouldn't change the deeply ingrained prejudices that people like Bryce Hammond perpetuated. In the days following the conference, Melanie immersed herself in strategy meetings with her team. Evan led the legal charge, outlining a discrimination lawsuit against Regal Auto House. Jenna Wallace, her PR expert, mapped out a plan to sustain public interest. David Lee, her trusted business strategist, began analyzing Regal Auto House's financial vulnerabilities. "We need to attack this from all angles," Melanie said, pacing in her office. "This isn't just about Bryce. It's about a culture that thrives on exclusion. If we can dismantle that, we can change the game for everyone." Bryce Hammond was seething. In his office, he reviewed the mounting evidence against him. The leaked email chain, the testimonies, and the PR backlash had turned his once loyal customer base against him. "What are we doing to contain this?" Bryce barked at his lawyer, Tom Grayson. Tom hesitated. "The lawsuit is gaining traction, and with the media coverage, it's hard to spin the narrative in your favor." Bryce slammed his fist on the desk. "Then discredit her. Dig up something, anything. I don't care what it takes." Bryce's desperation led him to hire a private investigator to dig into Melanie's past. But Melanie's life was an open book. The investigator found nothing scandalous, only stories of grit and resilience. Bryce's frustration grew, but his arrogance blinded him to the inevitability of his downfall. Evan Carter thrived under pressure. At Preston and Howard, his law firm, he worked tirelessly to build a case that would not only hold Bryce accountable, but set a precedent for similar lawsuits in the future. "We're arguing systemic discrimination," Evan explained to his colleagues during a strategy session. "This isn't just about one person's experience, it's about policies and practices designed to exclude." The legal team uncovered damning records. Internal memos prioritizing white, male clientele, and notes from staff meetings where Bryce openly disparaged certain demographics. Evan also filed complaints with the Consumer Protection Bureau and the State Civil Rights Commission, ensuring the case would draw scrutiny from multiple regulatory bodies. Jenna Wallace kept Melanie in the headlines. Appearances on talk shows and podcasts allowed Melanie to humanize her story while drawing attention to broader issues of discrimination in high-end retail. During one podcast, Melanie shared a pivotal moment from her youth. "I remember walking into a department store with my mom when I was 8, she said, her voice steady but emotional. "We were followed the entire time, as if we were thieves. That feeling of being judged, it stays with you." The anecdote resonated with listeners, sparking widespread conversations on social media. Meanwhile, Bryce attempted to counteract the bad press by releasing promotional content showcasing his diverse staff. But the effort backfired when employees came forward, revealing that the videos were staged. Sophia Martinez's story gained traction as well. Jenna arranged for Sophia to share her experience on a popular news program. With poise and sincerity, Sophia recounted the discrimination she faced at Regal Auto House. "He made it clear I wasn't good enough," Sophia said. "But this fight isn't just about me. It's about everyone who's been silenced." Her courage inspired others. Former employees of Regal Auto House began reaching out to Evan's firm, sharing similar stories of toxic workplace practices. Each testimony added weight to the case against Bryce. As the case gained momentum, Melanie faced a personal setback. She received an anonymous email with a veiled threat. "Stay in your lane, or you'll regret it." The message shook her, not because she feared for herself, but because she worried about Evan and the others involved. "What if they target my family?" she confided to Diane one evening. Diane's response was firm. "You've already come this far, Mel. Don't let them scare you now. You've got an entire community behind you." Melanie took a deep breath. The fear was real, but so was her determination. She refused to let threats derail her mission. Evan's team made a breakthrough when they uncovered financial records showing Regal Auto House had routinely denied financing options to minority customers while offering favorable terms to others. "This is it," Evans said, presenting the evidence to his team. "It proves intentional discrimination, not just implicit bias." The revelation was a game-changer. Media outlets seized on the story, further isolating Bryce and drawing attention to systemic inequities in the luxury retail industry. As Bryce's world crumbled, his arrogance persisted. During a private meeting with his board of directors, Bryce dismissed their concerns. "This is just a PR storm," he said. "It'll pass." But the board members were unconvinced. Behind closed doors, they began exploring options to mitigate the fallout, including the possibility of removing Bryce as CEO. Late one night, Melanie sat alone in her study, surrounded by the awards and accolades she had earned over her career. She picked up a framed photo of her late husband, Daniel. "I wish you were here," she whispered. "You'd know exactly what to say." Her thoughts drifted to Evan. She felt immense pride in the man he had become, using his skills to fight for justice. This wasn't just her battle anymore, it was theirs. The rising action reached a peak when Evan filed a motion to subpoena Bryce's personal communications. The motion was granted, and the emails revealed Bryce's outright disdain for minority clients, calling them bad for business. The evidence was explosive, triggering public outrage. Bryce's name trended online, accompanied by hashtags like Time for Change and Accountability Matters. With the case heading to court and public opinion firmly against Bryce, Melanie and Evan prepared for the next phase of their fight. "This isn't just about winning in court," Evan reminded his team. "It's about forcing a systemic change." Melanie nodded. We've come too far to stop now. Let's finish this. Evan's work on the case began drawing attention in legal circles. Known for his meticulous preparation and calm demeanor, he had become a rising star in civil rights litigation. Articles in business and law journals highlighted his efforts, dubbing him the advocate for change. But the spotlight came with its challenges. During a televised interview, a reporter pressed Evan about the emotional toll the case had taken on his mother. She's handled worse, Evan said with a faint smile. My mom's strength is the reason I'm here today. She taught me to stand up for what's right, no matter the cost. The quote went viral, inspiring others to share stories of their own battles against injustice. Melanie couldn't help but feel a surge of pride when she saw Evan's words trending on social media. Bryce Hammond wasn't going down without a fight. After failing to dig up dirt on Melanie, he decided to attack her credibility directly. At a press conference hastily organized by Regal Auto House, Bryce dismissed the lawsuit as a baseless attack on his business. This is nothing more than a PR stunt, he claimed, smirking at the cameras. The truth will come out, and we'll be vindicated. Melanie watched the broadcast from her office, shaking her head. He's doubling down, she said to Diane, who sat across from her. Diane chuckled dryly. That arrogance is going to bury him. Still, the press conference had an impact. Some media outlets began framing the lawsuit as a he said, she said scenario, muddying the waters. Evan warned Melanie that public opinion could waver if they didn't keep the pressure on. Jenna Wallace, Melanie's PR expert, saw an opportunity to shift the narrative. She worked with community leaders and advocacy groups to organize a rally outside Regal Auto House. The event drew hundreds of attendees, including activists, former employees of the dealership, and customers who had faced discrimination. Speakers shared their experiences, painting a vivid picture of the systemic bias they had encountered. Sophia Martinez took the stage, her voice shaking but resolute. I was told I didn't belong, she said, gripping the microphone. But today, we're here to say that everyone belongs. No one has the right to make you feel less than. The crowd erupted in applause, and images of the rally flooded social media. Justice in luxury trended for days, sparking conversations across the country. As Evan continued digging, he uncovered another layer of the case: Bryce's connections to influential figures in the luxury auto industry. One of these connections was Wesley Hartman, a senior executive at Regal Auto House's parent company, Silverline Holdings. Wesley had been one of Bryce's biggest supporters, often turning a blind eye to complaints about his behavior. Evan saw an opportunity. If we can show that Silverline Holdings knew about the discrimination and did nothing, it'll strengthen our case, he told his team. Melanie nodded. Expose them. Every last one. The lawsuit reached its first major milestone, a preliminary hearing to determine whether the case would proceed to trial. The courtroom was packed with reporters, legal observers, and members of the public. Melanie sat beside Evan, her composure unshaken despite the media frenzy. Bryce's lawyer, Tom Grayson, argued that the case was baseless and should be dismissed. But Evan countered with evidence: internal emails, financial records, and witness testimonies that painted a damning picture of systemic discrimination. As Evan delivered his closing argument, his voice filled the courtroom. This case isn't just about one woman's experience. It's about a culture that prioritizes prejudice over progress. We owe it to every person who has been marginalized to ensure that justice is served. The judge ruled in their favor, allowing the case to proceed. Melanie and Evan walked out of the courthouse to cheers from supporters gathered outside. Despite the victory, the fight was taking its toll on Melanie. The constant scrutiny, online harassment, and endless meetings left her physically and emotionally drained. One night, as she sat alone in her kitchen, her phone buzzed with a message from Diane. Remember why you're doing this. You've already inspired so many. Melanie smiled faintly, drawing strength from her friend's words. She thought of the people who had shared their stories with her, and the responsibility she felt to keep fighting. Behind the scenes, Bryce's desperation grew. Sales at Regal Auto House had plummeted, and Silverline Holdings was pressuring him to step down. During a tense board meeting, Wesley Hartman confronted Bryce. You've become a liability, Wesley said bluntly. This lawsuit is dragging the entire company down. Bryce refused to back down. I built this dealership from nothing, he snapped. I'm not going to let some lawsuit destroy me. But his bravado was wearing thin. Bryce began making reckless decisions, alienating his remaining allies and accelerating his downfall. As the case progressed, Evan uncovered a crucial piece of evidence. A confidential memo from Silverline Holdings outlining efforts to suppress complaints about Regal Auto House. This proves they knew, Evan said, showing the document to Melanie. They've been covering for Bryce for years. The memo became a centerpiece of their case, linking Silverline Holdings to the systemic discrimination at Regal Auto House. Jenna organized another rally, this time outside Silverline Holdings corporate headquarters. The event drew even larger crowds, including high-profile activists and public figures who had taken an interest in the case. Melanie addressed the crowd, her voice steady and powerful. This isn't just about one dealership or one company. It's about creating a world where everyone is treated with dignity and respect, no matter who they are. The rally made national headlines, further isolating Bryce and Silverline Holdings. As Melanie and Evan prepared for the next phase of the case, they shared a quiet moment in her living room. "You've done so much," Evan said, his voice filled with admiration. "So, have you," Melanie replied, placing a hand on his shoulder. "But we're not done yet. The real fight is still ahead." Evan nodded, determination etched into his face. "Then let's finish it." The buzz surrounding Melanie's lawsuit began to wane as public attention shifted to new controversies. The media, once so invested in her story, started covering other headlines, leaving her battle against Bryce Hammond and Regal Auto House in the background. For the first time since the ordeal began, Melanie felt a pang of doubt. Was all this effort worth it if people moved on so easily? Evan tried to reassure her. "The legal system doesn't work on the same timeline as the news cycle," he said. "We're still making progress." But Melanie couldn't shake the feeling that the momentum they had built was slipping away. The case took a sharp downturn during a critical court hearing. Bryce's lawyer, Tom Grayson, presented a surprise witness, a former Regal Auto House employee who claimed Melanie had exaggerated her account of the incident. "Ms. Carter was never mistreated," the witness testified. "She was aggressive and disruptive from the moment she walked in." The testimony, though false, cast doubt on Melanie's credibility. Public perception began to shift, with some questioning whether the lawsuit was a publicity stunt. Social media buzzed with accusations that Melanie was playing the victim. Evan was livid. "They're lying, and they know it," he fumed after the hearing. "We expected this," Melanie said quietly, though her voice trembled with suppressed frustration. "We'll counter it." The courtroom setback emboldened Bryce. In a television interview, he leaned into the narrative that Melanie's lawsuit was a baseless attack on his business. "She's trying to tear down a successful company for her own gain," Bryce said with a smirk. "But the truth is on my side." Behind closed doors, however, Bryce was grappling with mounting pressure. Sales at Regal Auto House had dropped further, and Silverline Holdings was quietly exploring options to distance themselves from him. One night, Melanie sat alone in her study, staring at the stack of legal documents on her desk. The weight of the battle felt heavier than ever. She thought of her late husband, Daniel, whose unwavering support had always been her foundation. "What would you do?" she whispered into the stillness. Her thoughts drifted to Evan, who had sacrificed so much to fight this case. She felt guilty for dragging him into a battle that seemed increasingly uphill. The next day, she confided in Diane. "What if this isn't worth it?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Diane placed a comforting hand on Melanie's shoulder. "You didn't come this far to back down now. Remember, this isn't just about you. It's about everyone who looks to you as a symbol of hope." While Melanie wrestled with doubt, Evan refused to let the case falter. He spent countless nights poring over documents, determined to find a way to regain the upper hand. His persistence paid off when he uncovered an overlooked detail in Bryce's financial records. A series of payments to key witnesses suggested that Bryce's legal team had coerced testimony. Evan's discovery reinvigorated the case. Armed with the evidence, he prepared to file a motion to challenge the credibility of Bryce's witnesses. The mounting pressure began to fracture Bryce's inner circle. Wesley Hartman, the senior executive at Silverline Holdings, grew increasingly frustrated with Bryce's stubbornness. "Your arrogance is costing us everything," Wesley snapped during a tense phone call. "If this lawsuit goes to trial, we're done." Bryce's bravado wavered. For the first time, he began to see the cracks in his carefully constructed facade. Jenna Wallace arranged for Melanie to appear on a widely viewed primetime news show, hoping to shift public sentiment back in her favor. During the interview, Melanie spoke candidly about the challenges she faced. "This fight has taken a toll," she admitted. "But I know it's necessary. Change never comes easily." The interview struck a chord with viewers, reigniting interest in the case. Social media lit up with messages of support, and the hashtag stand with Melanie and Justice in Luxury began trending once again. As the case gained new traction, Bryce's desperation turned darker. One evening, as Melanie left a fundraiser, she noticed a shadowy figure following her to her car. She turned to face the figure, her heart pounding. It was Bryce. His normally polished demeanor was disheveled, his eyes wild. "You think you've won?" he hissed. "You have no idea who you're messing with." Melanie held her ground, refusing to let fear show. "I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Bryce. And so does everyone else." The encounter left her shaken but resolute. She reported the incident to the authorities, further bolstering her case against him. The turning point came when a high-ranking employee at Silverline Holdings, Lila Morgan, came forward with critical information. Lila, who had grown disillusioned with the company's culture, provided Evan with internal emails showing that the corporation had not only ignored complaints about Bryce, but actively suppressed them to protect their reputation. "This is the smoking gun," Evan told Melanie, his excitement palpable. "It proves systemic negligence at the highest levels." In court, Evan presented the new evidence with surgical precision. The emails, combined with the financial records implicating Bryce's team, painted a damning picture. As the evidence was displayed on the courtroom screens, Bryce's confident facade crumbled. He fidgeted in his seat, his face pale. The judge's reaction was clear. "This evidence significantly alters the trajectory of this case," she said. "We will proceed to trial." Outside the courthouse, Melanie addressed a crowd of supporters. Her voice was steady, but her words carried the weight of her journey. "We've faced setbacks, but we're still here. And we're not stopping until justice is served." That night, Melanie and Evan shared a quiet moment in her living room. "We're turning the tide," Evan said, his tone confident. Melanie nodded, a faint smile on her lips. "But we're not done yet. The hardest part is still ahead." As they sat together, the city lights twinkling in the distance, Melanie felt a renewed sense of purpose. The low point had tested her resolve, but it hadn't broken her. As the legal battle escalated, Melanie began to feel the strain of isolation. While Evan and her team worked tirelessly, Melanie found herself increasingly alone with her thoughts. She began receiving fewer invitations to industry events, where she had once been a celebrated guest. Some clients distanced themselves from her firm, citing concerns about negative press. One evening, while scrolling through news articles, she stumbled upon an opinion piece titled, "Is Melanie Carter Fighting a Losing Battle?" It criticized her decision to pursue the lawsuit, suggesting that she was overreaching and risking her reputation. The words stung. "Am I making things worse?" she whispered to herself. But as she stared out at the city lights, she thought of the people who had shared their own stories of discrimination with her. They hadn't had the resources to fight back. "I can't stop now," she resolved, wiping away a single tear. While Evan had made significant progress in the case, he began encountering roadblocks. Bryce's legal team filed a series of motions to delay proceedings, hoping to wear down their opponents. Stalling tactics, Evan muttered during a late-night meeting with his team. "They're trying to exhaust us." David Lee, Melanie's strategist, offered a solution. "If we can demonstrate that Bryce's delays are harming public interest, we can petition the court for an expedited trial." The team worked through the night, crafting a compelling argument. When Evan presented the petition in court, the judge agreed to limit further delays, marking a small but significant victory. The stress reached a boiling point when Melanie's personal life was dragged into the spotlight. Bryce's private investigator uncovered details about her late husband, Daniel, attempting to twist their love story into a scandal. Tabloid headlines screamed, CEO's lawsuit clouded by family secrets. Melanie was furious. How dare they? She said during a meeting with Jenna and Diane. Jenna leaned forward. This is what people like Bryce do. They distract and deflect. We need to focus on the facts and not let them bait us. With Evan's guidance, Melanie released a brief, dignified statement. My husband was my greatest support and inspiration. His memory drives me to fight for justice, not just for myself, but for everyone. The statement was widely praised for its grace, and the tabloids' attempt to smear her backfired spectacularly. Bryce's arrogance and mounting desperation began to strain his relationships. His wife, Cassandra Hammond, confronted him one evening after seeing another scathing news segment. This lawsuit is ruining us, Cassandra said, her voice trembling. Our reputation, our finances, it's all falling apart. Bryce dismissed her concerns. This is temporary. Once we win, everything will go back to normal. But Cassandra wasn't convinced. If you think you're winning, you're delusional, she said before storming out. Amid the chaos, Melanie received an unexpected boost of encouragement. At a gala for a local charity, a young woman approached her, holding a small notebook. Ms. Carter, the woman said nervously, I just wanted to say thank you. I read about your story, and it inspired me to keep pushing for my dreams. I'm studying to be a lawyer because of you. Melanie's eyes welled with tears as she signed the woman's notebook. You've got this, she said. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. The interaction reminded her of why she had started this fight in the first place. Bryce's attempts to intimidate Melanie took a darker turn when she received an anonymous letter filled with vile insults and veiled threats. Evan was livid when he saw it. This has gone too far. We're reporting this to the authorities. The police launched an investigation, which only added to the growing pressure on Bryce. The media reported on the incident, further cementing public sympathy for Melanie. Behind the scenes, Silverline Holdings, the parent company of Regal Auto House, began to fracture under the weight of the lawsuit and the bad press. Wesley Hartman held a tense meeting with the board of directors. Bryce has become a liability, he said bluntly. If we don't cut him loose, he's going to drag the entire company down with him. The board agreed to convene a special meeting to discuss Bryce's future, marking the beginning of his professional unraveling. As the case progressed, Evan faced his own moment of doubt. Late one night, he sat in his office, surrounded by stacks of documents. The weight of the fight pressed heavily on his shoulders. He called his mother, needing her reassurance. Do you ever feel like this fight is bigger than us? He asked. All the time, Melanie admitted. But that's how I know it's worth it. Her words gave him the strength to push forward. The courtroom setback came during another hearing when Bryce's team successfully suppressed a key piece of evidence. The ruling was a blow to Melanie's case, leaving her team scrambling to recover. For a brief moment, Bryce's smirk returned. He felt invincible again, taunting Melanie with a smug look as they exited the courtroom. But Melanie refused to let him see her falter. Enjoy it while it lasts, she said under her breath. Just when things seemed bleakest, an unexpected ally emerged. Eleanor Jacobs, a former executive at Silverline Holdings, reached out to Evan with crucial evidence. Eleanor had resigned years ago, disgusted by the company's practices. She provided internal memos that directly implicated Silverline in covering up Bryce's discriminatory policies. This is the leverage we need, Evan said, his voice brimming with excitement. As Melanie reviewed the new evidence with Evan, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The fight wasn't over, and now they had the upper hand. We're going to win this, she said, her voice steady. Evan nodded. Not just for us, for everyone. Together, they prepared for the final phase of their battle, determined to see justice prevail. The internal memos provided by Eleanor Jacobs proved to be the game-changing evidence Melanie and Evan needed. The documents painted a vivid picture of systemic negligence within Silverline Holdings, detailing how executives had actively dismissed complaints against Bryce Hammond to protect their financial interests. Evan sat in his office, reviewing the evidence with his team. "This doesn't just implicate Bryce, it exposes the entire system," he said. "This is the moment we've been waiting for," Jenna Wallace added. "Once we go public with this, there's no turning back." Melanie, sitting at the head of the conference table, felt a surge of determination. "Then let's make it count." Jenna coordinated a press conference to reveal the memos to the public. Held in front of a packed audience of journalists, activists, and supporters, Melanie and Evan stood side by side as they delivered their statement. "This isn't just about one dealership or one man," Melanie began, her voice firm. "This is about a system that thrives on prejudice and exclusion. Today, we're exposing that system and demanding accountability." Evan outlined the key findings from the memos, his legal expertise shining through as he explained the implications. The press conference went viral, with news outlets across the country covering the revelations. Social media exploded with calls for justice, and hashtags like End the Exclusion and Hold Silverline Accountable trended for days. Behind closed doors, the Silverline Holdings board of directors scrambled to contain the fallout. "This is a PR disaster," one board member said during an emergency meeting. Wesley Hartman, who had been one of Bryce's staunchest allies, finally turned on him. "We have no choice but to cut ties with Hammond," he said. The board voted unanimously to remove Bryce from his position and initiate a review of their corporate policies. When Bryce received the news, he was livid. "You're throwing me under the bus?" he shouted during a call with Wesley. "This is the price of your arrogance," Wesley replied coldly. The trial began with a packed courtroom and a media frenzy outside. Melanie and Evan entered together, flanked by their legal team, as reporters shouted questions. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Bryce sat at the defense table, his once arrogant demeanor replaced by visible anxiety. Evan's opening statement set the tone. "This case isn't just about Melanie Carter. It's about a pattern of behavior that has gone unchecked for far too long. Today, we are holding those responsible accountable." The prosecution presented a compelling case, calling witnesses who testified about their experiences at Regal Auto House. Sophia Martinez delivered a particularly moving account, detailing the discrimination she faced as an employee. "I was told I wasn't good enough to represent the dealership," Sophia said, her voice trembling but resolute. "Today, I'm here to say that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity." Evan's cross-examination of Bryce was the highlight of the trial. Methodically, he dismantled Bryce's defense, using the internal memos and financial records to expose his culpability. "Mr. Hammond, is it true that you referred to certain customers as bad for business in internal emails?" Evan asked. Bryce stammered, his carefully rehearsed responses unraveling under the pressure. During a recess, Bryce approached Melanie in the courthouse hallway. His expression was desperate, his voice a harsh whisper. "Drop the case," he said. "Name your price." Melanie stared at him, unflinching. "You think this is about money?" she replied. "It's about justice, and you can't buy that." Bryce's face hardened as he realized she couldn't be intimidated or bribed. "You'll regret this," he muttered before storming off. After weeks of testimony, the case was handed to the jury. The deliberation stretched over 2 tense days, with reporters camped outside the courthouse and supporters gathering in solidarity. Melanie spent the waiting period with Evan and her closest friends. They reminisced about her journey, reflecting on how far she had come and what was at stake. "You've already won in so many ways," Diane said. "No matter what the verdict is, you've exposed the truth." The courtroom was silent as the jury returned with their decision. Melanie's heart pounded as the foreperson stood and read the verdict. "We find in favor of the plaintiff, Melanie Carter." A wave of emotion swept through the courtroom. Melanie felt tears well up as she embraced Evan, overwhelmed by relief and vindication. The verdict included substantial damages against Regal Auto House and Silverline Holdings, along with mandatory reforms to address discriminatory practices. The aftermath of the trial brought sweeping changes. Regal Auto House underwent a complete overhaul, with new leadership and a commitment to diversity and inclusion. Silverline Holdings announced a multi-million-dollar initiative to support minority-owned businesses, part of a broader effort to repair their tarnished reputation. Melanie used her settlement to launch a foundation dedicated to fighting systemic discrimination in corporate spaces. Named after her late husband, the Daniel Carter Justice Initiative became a beacon of hope for marginalized communities. One evening, as Melanie and Evan sat on her balcony overlooking the city, they reflected on their journey. "You did it," Evan said, a note of pride in his voice. "We did it," Melanie corrected, smiling. "And this is just the beginning." The city lights shimmered around them, a reminder of the possibilities that lay ahead. Weeks after the trial, life for Melanie Carter took on a different rhythm. Though the fight had been grueling, it had left her with a renewed sense of purpose. In her office, she reviewed the plans for the Daniel Carter Justice Initiative. The foundation would provide legal support, mentorship, and funding for individuals facing systemic discrimination. Melanie saw it as a way to give others the tools to stand up for themselves. Evan entered, holding a stack of proposals from law firms and activists wanting to collaborate. "Looks like everyone wants to be part of the change," he said with a smile. Melanie chuckled. "Good. We'll make sure their intentions match their actions." Her confidence was unshakable now. The lawsuit hadn't just been about justice for herself. It had been a catalyst for change in ways she hadn't fully anticipated. Across town, Bryce Hammond sat in his now sparsely furnished office at home. After being ousted from Regal Auto House, he faced mounting legal troubles and financial losses. His attempt to rebuild his career had failed. No one in the industry wanted to associate with someone whose name had become synonymous with arrogance and discrimination. Late at night, he scrolled through news articles about the reforms taking place at Silverline Holdings, each headline a reminder of his downfall. The weight of his actions finally settled on him, but there was no one left to offer him sympathy or absolution. The Daniel Carter Justice Initiative wasted no time getting to work. Its first case involved a young entrepreneur, Jasmine Porter, who had been denied a business loan despite meeting all the qualifications. Jasmine sat across from Melanie in the foundation's new office, sharing her story with quiet determination. "They told me my business idea wasn't viable," Jasmine said. "But I know it's because of who I am, not what I'm offering." Melanie nodded. "We've seen this pattern before. Let's make sure they can't dismiss you or anyone else so easily." Evan agreed to represent Jasmine personally, bringing the same intensity he had shown in his mother's case. The changes sparked by Melanie's lawsuit extended far beyond Regal Auto House and Silverline Holdings. Advocacy groups across the country used the case as a rallying cry to push for stricter anti-discrimination laws and corporate accountability. Melanie found herself invited to speak at conferences and panels, where she shared her story and emphasized the importance of persistence. "True power doesn't come from tearing others down," she said during one speech. "It comes from lifting others up and creating opportunities for everyone." Her words resonated deeply, inspiring a new wave of leaders committed to fairness and equity. For Evan, the case marked a turning point in his career. His reputation as a formidable civil rights attorney skyrocketed, and his name became synonymous with justice and integrity. But Evan remained humble, crediting his mother for his success. "She taught me everything I know about resilience and courage," he told a journalist during an interview. He continued to balance high-profile cases with mentoring young attorneys, ensuring that the next generation of legal professionals was equipped to tackle systemic issues head-on. One quiet evening, Melanie returned to the dealership where her journey had begun. Regal Auto House had been completely transformed under new management, its doors open to a more diverse clientele. She walked the showroom floor, taking in the changes. A young salesperson approached her, smiling warmly. "Good evening, ma'am. Can I help you?" Melanie returned the smile. "Just looking. But thank you." As she left, she glanced back at the gleaming cars, a symbol of how far things had come. Later that night, Melanie and Evan hosted a small dinner at her penthouse, inviting close friends and allies who had supported them through the ordeal. As the group laughed and reminisced, Evan raised his glass. "To my mom," he said, his voice filled with pride, "for showing us all what it means to stand tall and fight for what's right." The room erupted in applause, and Melanie felt a swell of gratitude. She had fought hard, endured setbacks, and faced doubts, but she had never given up. The lawsuit had ended, but Melanie's work was far from over. She knew that the fight for justice was ongoing, but she was ready to face whatever came next. As she sat on her balcony that night, looking out over the city, she felt a deep sense of peace. She had turned her pain into purpose, her struggle into strength, and she knew that her journey had only just begun. As Melanie stood on her balcony, gazing at the glittering city skyline, she reflected on everything that had brought her to this moment. The battles fought, the obstacles overcome, and the lives she had touched. Her journey was proof that standing up for what was right could spark meaningful change, no matter how daunting the odds. If Melanie's story inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated on more stories of resilience, empowerment, and justice. What would you do if you faced similar challenges? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep this important conversation going. Together, we can build a world where everyone gets the respect and opportunities they deserve.